Okay, Madam Clerk, ready? Okay, I'm going to call to order the City Council meeting for April the 13th, 2023. And Madam Clerk, roll call and posting of the agenda.
Councilmember Perrello.
Say here. Here.
Councilmember Turan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald.
Here.
Mayor Zaragoza.
Here.
We have a quorum for this meeting.
And my understanding
The
is-
agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall Bulletin Board on March 29th, 2023. Thank you.
And my understanding is that Councilman Basua is going to be here about 6 o'clock, and we'll also probably have the other council members showing up soon. Okay, our next item is item B. This is an appointment item, and B1 is subjects water update by Cayugas Water District. And we have Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
Hi, good evening, Mayor. Joseph Marcinko, Assistant Public Works Director. It's nice to be here this evening. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be able to introduce our partner here from Cayugas, Dan Drugan. He's the Water Resources Manager for them. He's here to share good information on the drought and water supply update. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Dugan. You were here before, so it's nice to see you again with probably good news, I hope.
Oh, absolutely. It's great to be back now, and especially in April when we have the full kind of imported water supply picture in hand right now. So it's really great to be
And
back.
before you start, we're not going to talk about Florida, right? How many inches it had of rain?
Okay.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. Great. Okay. For the record, my name is Dan Drugan. I represent Cayugas Municipal Water District, and I'm here to give a water supply update. By way of background, Cayugas Water District, we are a water wholesaler, and so we serve imported water supplies to the communities in southeast Ventura County. We do that through 19 water purveyors that serve many of the areas within that yellow shaded portion in southeast Ventura County on this graphic. Moving ahead, these are the 19 purveyors, and this shows their dependence on the imported water supply that Cayugas provides. You can see definitely a stark split here between the areas in what we call the upper zone of Cayugas, that would be the Arroyo, Simi, and the Conejo Valley areas, which are essentially almost 100% reliant on the imported supplies that we serve. And then down here, as you go further down into the Cayugas service area, Sig Oxnard right there, about a third in terms of its dependence on imported water supplies that Cayugas provides. You've seen this image before, I'm sure. This shows California right here and those major imported water sources, how they make it down to Southern California. There's been a lot of attention in the media right now on that source all the way to the right of the graphic, which is the Colorado River Basin, and some of the discord over there with the 7 basin states and coming up with a uniform approach on how to best take cutbacks on that system. Hasn't quite happened yet. But that's a long-term issue. What we've been dealing with over here in southeast Ventura County is the more immediate one, which is year-to-year highly variable hydrology on the State Water Project. And so the State Water Project, how that works is there's the accumulation of snowpack and rainfall up in the northern Sierras during the winter periods. And then during the spring and summertime, that snowpack melts off into reservoirs, travels down by gravity, ultimately into that Bay Delta area where the California Department of Water Resources, they are the operator of the State Water Project, they pump that water south through the California Aqueduct. And for us, and what we're very concerned with, of course, is Castaic Lake. That's the terminus of the west branch of the California State Water Project for us. And that's where Metropolitan takes delivery of that water, treats it, and delivers it to Cayugas. In dry years, I would point out that Metropolitan does maximize delivery of Colorado River supplies into the service area. In LADWP, you can see that graphic right there in the middle. They take their Owens Valley supply, which is really supported from the southern end of the Sierras. And this year, it's been quite a bounty of the Sierra snowpack for LADWP as well. We presented this image to the council here in the past that shows just how, again, highly variable the hydrology can be in the Sierras. That's the State Water Project supply that we rely on here at Cayugas. And what you see with the image on the left, the bifurcation here is just only 2 years in that time frame from 2013 to 2022 where the snowpack has been above average. In fact, we just are now emerging out of the heels right here of that 3 consecutive dry year period right there from 2020 through 2022. Now, of course, we're wondering, well, the snowpack this year And if I were to show that, it goes off the charts. In fact, we have the largest snowpack on record here since the 1980s with our Northern Sierra supplies. So,
Dan, go ahead,
Yep.
Councilmember.
Thank you. Do you want us to hold questions to the end? I'm assuming you're going to talk a little bit more about the snowpack, but
yeah, absolutely. I can take questions now if you'd like. Yep.
all right. So that's amazing to see, and something I think that has been kind of hinted at if folks watch the evening news around the snow around the state. A question I have is knowing, very little about hydrology and all of this. When we have snow of this level, a snowpack of this level, when that all melts off in the next couple of weeks and months, what is the state's ability to capture that and utilize that?
That's a great question, and one big issue has been modernizing the state's infrastructure to be able to take delivery of the floodwater. We've been talking for decades about a through Delta facility, California Water Fix, under Governor Brown years, and now Delta Conveyance. So a tunnel to bypass the Delta that might be able to take more delivery of these floodwaters. Unfortunately, a lot of that floodwater might have to go through big bypasses up in the Sacramento area, like the Yolo bypass, for example. And many communities up in those areas are preparing, for this floodwater to come down. So you might have seen the news about Parejo and other communities up in Northern California that have been devastated by the floodwaters just from the storm events that have occurred. So gearing up for the snowmelt is going to be a huge deal for the state. We've seen that with Governor Newsom's executive order, his announcement just last month, where he stopped short of declaring the drought over, but he did encourage all agencies to take advantage of this floodwater.
Thank you, Dan.
Moving on, in terms of how that snowpack translates to water supplies on the state water system, looks like this bar chart. That red line is where I usually like to keep your focus on, which shows the degrading reliability of that supply over time, primarily driven by climate change. But now what we're seeing right now in 2023, that's the last bar to the right, is a 75% state water project allocation. That's more water that the state's prepared to deliver in the last 3 years combined. And in fact, that allocation will be improving as the snow melt continues. So that allocation, that 75%, is not final. In fact, this year might look very similar to 2017, which on this bar chart looks at about like 85, 90% state water allocation.
Additional questions? Go ahead,
Yes.
Councilmember.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. And I really appreciate this chart because I have seen discussion from folks saying, oh, well, the drought's over. We had so much rain that we should be relaxing drought restrictions, and we should be allowed to wash our cars and water our lawns. And really, for me, correct me if I'm wrong, the perspective on this is that the amount there for 2023, while significantly greater than the last 3 years combined, is on par with 2019 and still less than 2017. So it kind of seems like in relative terms, in relative memory, folks may feel like there is more water or more rain than we've had, which is technically true. But when you look historically at it, it's nothing really out of the ordinary besides the last 3 years. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think from a water industry perspective, we're starting to see our terminology change a little bit from drought to climate whiplash. And so that's really what we've seen because, again, you have a really great banner year. We could immediately go back into really dry years with our water supplies.
Yes, thank you for that.
Thank you.
I did want to give this a little bit of time here with the recap of the emergency water conservation because we're talking about the great snowpack that we have, the improved water conditions, but we did navigate through some pretty significant emergency water conservation restrictions last year. And that, again, was due to the 3 consecutive dry years of that Sierra snowpack to where Metropolitan Water District did not have enough supplies to serve its state water project dependent areas, and that includes Callegas. Metropolitan had to actually borrow water from the state of California, which was for the first time ever that it's had to do that in its history, just to meet minimum human health and safety needs. And that was the reason why we came to all the communities and requested that one-day-a-week watering restriction be implemented. And these were the communities in the Metropolitan Water District that were impacted by that. You can see Callegas to the left. The biggest agency on this graphic is the city of Los Angeles, and primarily the San Fernando Valley area. As I mentioned, they rely on the Owens Valley supply, and so when that dries up, Usually that coincides with the state water supplies being dried up. They do have to swing on to Metropolitan, and then we all have to manage through a very short fall in supply together. So let's go back to improved water supply conditions. This graphic on the left is the 8-station index, and what this is, those are markers up there in the northern Sierras that are tracking the accumulation of precipitation over time. There's a lot of data on this graphic, but the main thing I'd like to draw your attention to is that the current year, the current rainfall year, is not the highest rainfall year on record in California. Mm-hmm. That's very significant because we have the highest snowpack on record right now. Right. So I think what this tells us is that when conditions are right, with how those atmospheric river events came in, the cooler temperatures, that really was the mix for this snowpack that we have right now. Mm-hmm. Okay. This shows, just from the floodwaters that we had, how the reservoirs were recovering. Many across California have already recovered to where they should be around this time of year. And in fact, many are starting their operations for flood control right now. We're starting to see releases from Lake Oroville. That's what this graphic on the right is showing, that with that green line, is it's reaching that flood control pool to where it's necessitated to release water from that reservoir.
And Dan, what concerns is happening there with the release of some of that water? Are there any concerns because of that water? No.
Yeah, so one big thing with the floodwaters is you want to do it early enough so that you're not having to release more than you have to later on with that snowpack melting off. Mm-hmm. We saw that in 2017 in Oroville where the spillway collapsed. Right. And that was, I believe, for the first time in my memory in a long time, that a whole huge community of people were mandated to evacuate from that area.
Remember that, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
So right here, this shows the snowpack and how it's really packed in over there in the Sierras on the right and across the Rockies. So from the Sierras to the Rockies, which is great news for the Colorado River Basin, as you know, there continues to be that negotiation point with the basin users. But some of that a lot of that snowpack will come in and help fill Lake Powell and Lake Mead and at least take the edge off a little bit. But there's still a long-term issue that needs to be resolved in the Colorado River Basin. Mm-hmm. I mentioned floodwater releases. That's what that looks like. Mm-hmm. And that right there is the spillway. That was the first time the spillway has operated since 2019. Again, I mentioned that in 2017, that was when the spillway had failed considerably. And luckily, it's holding up quite well right now with those rate of releases. A couple of administrative points here. Back in February, Cayugas, we suspended our enforcement of the 1-day per week watering restriction due to the improvements in our imported water supplies. Following that in March, Metropolitan Water District ended its own emergency water conservation program. Those were the restrictions placed on all those communities that are state water project dependent. Last month, Governor Newsom eased the statewide drought restrictions. He ended the ask of a specific conservation target that communities had to achieve, but he did maintain a ban on irrigating non-functional turf with potable water supply, and that's a big issue right now in the legislature that's being currently being looked at. And he did stop short of declaring the drought officially over, acknowledging that long-term water reliability challenges remain. Mm-hmm. Here in April, Cayugas, following that announcement by the governor, we actually rescinded all drought stages to now a baseline water use efficiency condition. And we did encourage our purveyors and our communities to take advantage of expanded groundwater recharge capabilities where feasible. So that's currently where we're at, is essentially no mandatory restrictions. And that's right here. Due to improved water supply conditions, mandatory water conservation is no longer needed. But I do really want to thank the city of Oxnard for their efforts and all the residents at home that did their part to conserve water, for making water conservation a California way of life. We really could not have navigated through this last drought period without you. And working with your staff here has been a pleasure for Cayugas as well. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any more questions.
Thank you, Dan. Council members, any questions of Dan? Councilmember Perrella?
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the fact that Cayugas was instrumental in getting a drought group meeting during the thing, and I hope we continue because it was a lot of positive, and oftentimes when it rains, people forget that there are times that it didn't rain. The question I have, you showed the spillway. In the news today, they're talking about an earthen dam near Claremont that they are concerned that it may be getting to the point where it could overtop and that the water is somehow being released and coming up underneath residential homes. Are there any areas where that is of a concern to your organization, where you're directly involved?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, residents that have hillside lot areas, they've likely seen a lot of that infiltration come in from now. You're seeing this groundwater come in just from how saturated the watersheds have been. I can't say that we've seen anything happen to our infrastructure. We've seen LA DWP with their aqueduct system be undermined by just massive amounts of flooding up there. So I expect that there will be more emphasis on funding for hardening your existing infrastructure against climate change and against events like this in the future. So as far as our system is concerned, we think that we're top notch and we're okay.
And a second question, do you have any information with respect to, with the water that is coming down the Santa Clara River that United Water is able to spread in spreading grounds? How much water have we put in the ground?
So I don't have that number off the top of my head, but one nice talking point here is I think Lake Piru is full for the first time,
That's right.
I think, since 2005 is what I heard. So that's pretty significant. Quite the recovery for that system.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
So Dan, the mandate for one time a week watering can now go twice a week, or is that part of our, Michael, is that what are we recommending for Oxnard?
Yeah, I'll look, Michael Wolf, Director of Public Works, I'll look to the city attorney to make sure we stay on topic here, but we will be bringing that
Bring it
to the
back.
council next week, so we'll be talking about that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Dan, thank you. Any additional questions, Dan? If not, one more, go ahead.
You mentioned that the state is going to, the restrictions on specific type of turf, non-met. Can you get a little deeper into that?
Right, so a big new term for us this last drought period was non-functional turf grass, and that's grass that isn't really used for a recreational benefit. It's solely ornamental, and it's around your business parks. It's around your commercial properties, and it doesn't really have community value per se in terms of having that recreational benefit. So the state has really targeted that as been a wasteful use of potable water supply. They're currently taking this up in the legislature to best define what non-functional turf grass is. And they're really focusing on, I would say, the commercial areas, the business park areas, and there is some discussion as to the multifamily areas, but that's still being currently litigated in the legislature right now.
Okay. Thank you very much. And also would like to say that I'm very fortunate to serve on a council where we have staff that's worked hand in hand with you and kept us up to speed and helped you as much as they have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, Councilmember Turan.
Thank you. And just as a quick follow-up to Councilmember Perello's question here, and maybe our Public Works Director can help with this. In the city of Oxnard, when we look at non-functional turf, if we have some concrete examples of what that is, off the top of my head, that would be a commercial area that has grass that's on just like what looks like a parkway or next to a parking lot or on islands within a parking lot that has, essentially turf that would need to be watered. Is that what we'd consider non-functional turf?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, some folks did ask during the water restrictions why schools were allowed to continue watering their fields. And I believe I heard that for schools, because that is considered functional turf, if they were using it for sports or different, classes for physical education, that fell under the definition of functional turf, correct?
Correct, and we also had in our documents the ability for additional watering as necessary for those sports activities. So that was allowed as well.
Great. All right, thank you. And thank you again for the presentation.
Dan, thank you so much for the presentation. Ma'am, do we have any speakers on this item, either virtually
Mayor
or here?
Zaragoza, no, we have no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you. Our next item is item B2. The subject is Transit Integration and Efficiency Study. And we have Mr. Martin Erickson. First off, Michael.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem Council members. Michael Wolf, Director of Public Works. I wanted just a brief introduction to this item. So we do have the Executive Director from VCTC here, Martin Erickson. He's going to talk about an interesting study that his team and consultants have been working on. So he'll give a presentation on the Transit Integration and Efficiency Study.
Thank you. Martin, welcome.
And if I can just apologize for the typo in our agenda. You're not here to discuss the efficiency study, but the efficiency study. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Zaragoza, members of the City Council. It is wonderful to be back in Oxnard. City Manager Nguyen, City Attorney, nice to see you all. I always love coming back here. It brings back memories of when I used to present here, when I had hair still, many years ago. But
What, did Brian do that to you?
no, I think it might have partly been the issue of public transit. I mean, I must say. But I am yet another acronym for us all to digest, but we feel like this is a good one. I mean, transit integration and efficiency study neatly becomes TIES. And again, I am the executive director of the Ventura County Transportation Commission. I want to begin by recognizing Mayor Pro Tem McDonald, who has ably represented Oxnard on the commission for many years now. Most of you know, but for some of you who don't, the Ventura County Transportation Commission is the county's transportation commission. We have a 17-member commission. It's the 5 county supervisors and either a mayor or council member from each of the 10 cities. That gets us to 15, not done yet. And then we have 2 public members who are non-elected officials, one appointed by the cities and one appointed by the county. We have a small, I say a small but mighty staff that mainly focuses on programming, transportation, and transit funding. I like to think of us as kind of the conduit for the state and federal transportation funding and some local funding that comes into Ventura County. But we are also, in many respects, a mobility agency. We deal a lot with public transit, with the roads, highways, funding for streets, bicycle lanes. We are also have a few other appellations, one of them being Airport Land Use Commission. We deal with airport zoning issues. We are the Congestion Management Agency. And we are probably most importantly for transit and to work with Oxnard and other cities, we are the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, RTPA. I'll try not to speak completely in acronyms tonight, but that is an important one because in that function, we help program the state transit funding that makes up most of the transit funding in Ventura County. So why embark on a study of transit integration in Ventura County? We began this discussion, we began looking at this before the pandemic started. And even before the pandemic, it's important to remember that public transit in Southern California was not really doing that great in terms of meeting the very ambitious goals that the state had set forward for air quality improvement and congestion reduction. However, once the pandemic began, public transit, not just here, but all over the country, and in many cases the world, fell precipitously. It had been falling before the pandemic, but in some cases it fell up to 80 or 90% in the initial years of the pandemic. And a little more than 3 years after the pandemic, we have still not reached pre-pandemic ridership levels in all but a very few instances. And in areas like commuter rail, it's still only about 42% of pre-COVID ridership. So there are obviously challenges that have been created by that financially, but I also want to note here that during the entire pandemic, bus drivers, transit employees were at the front lines the entire time, transporting people to their jobs, transporting people to medical appointments. There was no break. And it was a challenging time. I will say, though, that Ventura County's transit operators really banded together. I think we worked in an unprecedented level of cooperation that was reminiscent of how we responded to the local fires and floods that we faced. But there were some real challenges in terms of costs of paying drivers, in terms of losing drivers and retaining them. And those challenges are still with us today. About 10, 12 years ago, some of you may recall there was a similar study that set forth to examine how transit in Ventura County could be reorganized in a different way. And while there was certainly some challenging and controversial moments that came from that, I think two real important things that did come out of that was the creation of the Gold Coast Transit District. Gold Coast Transit, before it became a district, was a joint powers agency. And Oxnard was the largest member. Gold Coast is the largest transit agency in Ventura County by a long shot. But once they became a district, they became direct recipients of funding and were not a JPA anymore, which I think helped their ability to plan and move forward. And also the East County Transit Alliance was formed. And that was a group of the East County operators specifically looking at especially paratransit coordination in the East County. One thing that the study 10 years ago showed that some smaller cities, in fact, some cities that ran municipal systems, preferred to have those municipal systems. They preferred the control they had. They also preferred the fact that they could regulate the service more easily than being part of a larger system. And I don't, in that vein, I don't think the discussion about transit is dissimilar from other issues, whether it's public safety or how is a consolidated single system better than having multiple systems? It's a good question for many forms of public service that we work with.
Yeah, Martin, does Santa Paula still have their own transit?
Santa Paula does not have its own transit. Actually, VCTC provides a service for what we call the Heritage Valley. So it's Santa Paula, Fillmore, Piru.
Piru, yeah.
It is served by a service that's called the Valley Express.
Yeah, because at one time, wasn't it one time they had their own transit, right?
At one time, actually, Santa Paula was part of Gold Coast many years ago,
Right,
and they chose to leave Gold Coast when it was a JPA to have their own system.
Right, thank you. Mhm.
So the current study again began, and it has been a very detailed and well, I think, well-intentioned from the perspective of getting as much input as possible. We've worked with all the transit operators, interviewed commissioners, worked with the city managers group, and really tried to get as much detail as we could. Now, remember, this is happening in the context of the pandemic, so it was, some might say, a difficult time to run a study like this when you're trying to keep transit really on the streets and functional during the pandemic. But I think it led, sometimes in periods of great transition are the times you can learn most about the systems you're trying to improve. And I feel like in that case, we did learn a lot. And I think the largest question that this study sets out to answer is, can integration, at least in various different levels, improve the transit experience and the rider experience in Ventura County? As I noted, there are many different operators in Ventura County. If you count all of them, there's 9. That's not really that uncommon for our area. For those of you who are familiar with the LA area to the south, there is Metro, which is the large agency, but there are also dozens and dozens of small muni agencies from different city transit systems like, well, there's too many to go into, but I think some of the very familiar ones, the Big Blue Bus from Santa Monica, it's a separate city system. There are transit systems in Glendale. They all work closely and interact with the Metro system. One other issue that I know many of you are aware of that makes Ventura County unique, and maybe not in a good way, is that we don't have a local transportation sales tax countywide. Our surrounding neighbors, and really we are one of the largest urbanized counties in California to not have one. Why is that important? Because revenues from a local transportation measure like Santa Barbara has and Los Angeles has, well, Los Angeles actually has 4, Orange County has one, provides additional transit operating cost that can help run more transit. It also provides money for matching large transportation grants and other issues. But it has been, I think, one of the issues that make a regional system or a more effective regional system more challenging, because without that additional source of operating funds, you're going to need to find a source of funding to provide additional transit operating. And for most cities, they have needs, whether they're road repair or other needs. They don't typically have additional funding that they can say, we'd like to put this into public
And Martin,
transit.
that's really has hindered Ventura County tremendously, not having the sales tax.
Well,
You know, because I know we were talking about the additional lane and the 101 and additional funding for the cities, you know, for streets and et cetera, et cetera. So at one time, we were looking at, what, 2/3 to pass something like that? Is it down to 50 now? Have we ever gone there yet?
that's a great question, Mayor Zaragoza. It typically is at 2/3 to pass a specific purpose sales tax like transportation or public safety. However, in recent years, some communities have been having a mechanism where an agency, a community group, will put a measure on the ballot and run it as a community tax and only needs 50% plus 1. Now, there is a lot happening in that arena right now. There's a potential ballot measure that will likely be going forward in 24 that may limit those type of taxes going forward. So there's some uncertainty there, but the ones that are still kind of tested and tried or true are that 2/3 support level. And VCTC tried most recently in 2016, got about 58%, which was a big improvement over last time. In most cases, you hear 58%, you think, well, that must have won, but again, that's still short of that 9-point supermajority. So we will see, but I concur with you. I think one of the biggest issues it raises is that it leaves Ventura County at an enduring competitive disadvantage in not having match money for large capital grants.
And the match money is the issue, you know, because a lot of people that have that match money, then they can
Well,
supplement.
We can write the best application in the world, and if a neighboring county says, we're gonna throw in $30 million, it makes it not impossible, but challenging.
Thank you for.
Before I became executive director, about 15 months ago, I was transit director for 6 years, so I want to be mindful that I could probably talk about transit all night, and you have many issues, so I want to try to get through this and leave time for questions. One of the things that the study revealed is that there are some variations across the county, whether it's rider policies, the amount of online activity, promotion of service. And in some cases, these variations reflect local communities, but what we also saw is there was an opportunity, and in many cases, VCTC has been stepping in to help provide a more uniform promotion through our outreach services to let people know about transit, to let people know that transit is coming back, to try to get people back onto transit, which is really a big issue right now. I'd say one of the biggest challenges is gaining ridership to get back to the pre-COVID levels, retaining drivers and staff, and encouraging people to entertain a career in transit, driving a bus, being involved in it. But throughout, one of the key things we looked at was approaches to integration. And when you look at them from communication, coordination, collaboration, and consolidation, the issue of collaboration was one that I think there was a strong consensus on, that the TIE study and the goals that are delineated in it can serve as a roadmap for the future of transit in Ventura County, and not necessarily one that has to be chosen at one time. It can be implemented over time, but it presents a lot of good options to have moving forward when hopefully funding improves. Hopefully more funding will be available for public transit as we go forward. So some of the recommended actions and strategies focused on alignment and, in some cases, centralization of demand response service, for instance. Now, a lot of you who aren't familiar with demand response, that typically can be service for paratransit service for seniors or disabled people, but you can also have general public demand response. Some communities, for instance, the Heritage Valley area, Valley Express, Camarillo, Gold Coast has been experimenting with that, what they call microtransit, or something different from the big bus just running around picking people up on a fixed route. It's a service that is a little more nimble. However, it's also costly. It's also per passenger more costly than the typical fixed route transit, at least when that fixed route transit has enough riders in it to make it worthwhile. So I will now go over the alternative summary. And there were basically 3 recommendations, and we brought these recommendations to the commission at our February meeting. And I'd say it was a good meeting. There was a lot of robust discussion, although not one clear alternative was chosen. Oops, hope I didn't turn that off. Maybe look at those screens.
Here we go.
All right. So the three scenarios really ranged from mostly collaborative, kind of partial consolidation in the middle, and then a full consolidation option with one countywide agency. Other variations and alternatives are possible. And again, I want you to keep in mind that when I call this a roadmap, when I call this almost like a menu of options to choose from, you can start at one and move to another. You can start at one and the others can be more aspirational based on additional funding or time. But I think the unique nature of Ventura County, when you look at how the varying communities, the 10 cities, the different levels of population throughout the county, the different needs, I want to make sure that I emphasize that in that time period between the last attempt at this study and now, we have made some really good progress. Alternative 1 focuses on sub-regional consolidation of demand response service. Again, that service that is not just a fixed route bus, but a service that either provides mainly for senior citizens or the disabled community. And for the fixed route side of the service, the regular buses, you would look at more interagency coordination, more opportunities for regional marketing, standardization of rider policies, which age groups can ride, making that clear and making that something that the customer doesn't have to think about too much. So alternative 1, I guess you'd say partial consolidation. Alternative 2 took it a little further. It would create a countywide demand response agency, a separate agency that would provide better linkage and could be linked to another existing agency. And on the fixed route side, there would be a consolidation of fixed route services. So Gold Coast would continue to be the operator on the West County, but there would be either a new JPA that would consolidate the East County operators into a system a little more similar to Gold Coast. VCTC in all these scenarios would remain as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. That's what we were set up as in state statute. But all bus operations, at least for the West County and probably including Santa Paula and Fillmore, would go into Gold Coast Transit. And then finally, alternative 3, or the complete consolidation option, would see all public transit services integrated into Gold Coast Transit. Now, Gold Coast Transit, and Mayor Pro Tem McDonald has made this point before, has always had the opportunity for people to join it going forward. Mm-hmm. It requires a commitment by the agency that wants to join them, and it would change the Gold Coast structure of their board, but that option has always been there. And VCTC would still remain as the RTPA, but again, Gold Coast would be the one countywide operator. In the discussion on the February meeting, that was probably the least promoted of the options, and there was probably more interest in alternatives 1 and 2. So when you look at the options, and you can make, I think, good arguments for each one of them, it really is a question of what is the best, what is the best regional option going forward. And I will say that one of the things I'm very proud of my board, of the commission, is that more often than not on these challenging regional decisions with transportation or transit, they have made the right decision based on the existing resources we have and where the county is right now, but always had an eye toward improving the current situation. Looking at some of the pros and cons, alternative 1 would require an action plan or a commitment. Again, the point that this is a roadmap going forward, meaning you could start with alternative 1 and have an aspiration to move to 2 and then possibly even 3, or you could take a combination of the 3. One other overriding issue that was on people's minds, as we all know, is we look at our funding situation. A year ago, the state was looking at over $100 billion surplus. Now they are looking at what is considered around a $22 billion deficit, will likely be higher. That affects transit, especially because right now the state is looking at reducing transit. And I know Oxnard, I know all the cities in the county have been expressing concerns about that, particularly at a time when the state is looking at transit to help, again, meet its overarching goals for congestion reduction and air quality improvement. So I would argue the last thing we want to do right now is reduce the already not adequate transit funding. What we are seeking through transit advocacy organizations statewide and the transit agencies themselves is actually more flexibility with funding, so that agencies like Gold Coast and VCTC can be able to use funding more effectively. In some cases, use funding for capital, perhaps be able to use that for operating, and for relief for, frankly, unexpected issues that come up. Gold Coast Transit recently had to grapple with natural gas costs that jumped extremely high 1 month, and hopefully have stabilized a little bit now, but there are unknown variables that constantly affect the amount of transit that can be put on the street.
We were facing the same problem here.
Well, and that is, that's just something that you can budget for, but once you are hit with those higher bills, you have to find a way to pay them. So the roadmap for the future, I feel like the ties, and there were many times when we were doing this study during the height of the pandemic, even before the vaccines were done, and they were saying, why are we still doing this right now when we were just struggling to keep transit running? But I think in that time we learned collectively among all the operators that there were things we could do to make the service better. And I want to note a few of the things that we have mentioned here before and talked about. Is 6 years ago, VCTC initiated the College Ride program, which has probably been our most successful ridership program to date, especially for Gold Coast Transit. It's a use of state grant funding, in this case, the funding from the Cap and Trade program, LC TOP, Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, it's another acronym. But it's money that comes back to each county. VCTC worked with all the operators to say, rather than take this money and parse it out to each city so they could have a little bit of money, let's pool it all together and run a program, the College Ride program, which gives college students at Oxnard, all the community colleges, CSUCI, and Thousand Oaks free transit use. Not just for the college trips, but overall. A year ago, using that same source of funding, we started the Youth Ride Free program, which expands that idea, and now any student 10 to 18, high school students, middle school, can also ride any transit system, any transit in Ventura County at any time. And in a little over a year, that program has probably created the lion's share of our ridership recovery. So those are, I think, two examples of practical strategies that TIES is looking at and recommending. I'm going to briefly go over stakeholder concerns. Many of you can imagine them working, those of you who sit on regional boards. There's a push and pull many times between local control and a regional imperative. There are many services in the county that are community services, whether it's the Ojai Trolley. That's a separate service that runs in the city of Ojai. It's run by the city of Ojai, even though Gold Coast Transit serves that area. Camarillo Dial Ride. Moore Park's Micro Transit Project, which is a very innovative new project that is showing some real improvement. And Gold Coast also has been doing some microtransit projects, things like the late night rides, which is a kind of novel service that, again, demand response, using a smaller vehicle, providing service for people to get back late at night, usually after the regular bus service has stopped running. There was concerns that among some that consolidation might have the benefit, it could reduce underperforming services in smaller communities. But there was also a feeling of do no harm first. Some of these community services are really beloved, and well, on paper they may look like they could be improved. Sometimes services like the Ojai Trolley are something that the community really likes, even though it may not be as effective as a different service, one could argue. So finally, why are we here right now back at the cities? What we determined after the February meeting was that VCTC would go back out to each city, to go back out to all the stakeholders and say this was the input we had on the plan right now, but we would like to get additional feedback, especially that we're hopefully moving into the endemic phase of the pandemic, that it's getting further behind us, even though I think its impacts, especially on public transit, are still being felt very strongly. The future steps will be collaboration with, again, all the represented groups, and that staff will begin to implement the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, whether that's better marketing, better coordination, looking at all our schedules to see that there's a seamless connection, and this also spills into the rail services. Mayor Pro Tem McDonald, I believe you all know, also represents VCTC on the Low Sand Board. That's the Amtrak service that runs between San Diego and San Luis Obispo, and Ventura County is a member of that. We are also member agencies of Metrolink, and that is an important commuter rail service for Southern California.
Thank you, Martin.
So with that, I am open to questions. And I just also wanted to acknowledge Oxnard city staff for participating throughout this project, for city manager Wind and the city managers group. I think we had a lot of really invaluable input throughout, and thank you again for hearing my presentation.
Thank you so much, Martin. Council members, Mayor Pro Tem, no? Council Member Perrello?
Thank you, Martin. It's good to see you here again. Thank you. A couple of questions. Specifically, you mentioned the possibility of standardizing and with ridership. Are the rules different as far as fare for a certain age group, or what do you mean by standardizing riders between organizations?
So some cities might say their senior discount bullet for seniors at age 62. Some might say 65. Some, Gold Coast, for instance, offers, make sure I get this right, free service for those over 75 on regular bus service, not paratransit service. So there is some variability What we'd like to do is try to find a way to have a little more unanimity, so it's easier from the customer perspective on what service they can use and what they can move around. And it's a good point you bring up, Councilmember Perello, because I think that's what's made programs like the College Ride program and the Youth Ride Free program so effective, is that it's very simple. You know, you are a college student, you are a youth between 10 and 18, you can use the bus, any system, anytime, not just going to school or.
Thank you. With respect to the college system, do you track the students that would be going to the community colleges, where they come from and where they go? Specifically, we're trying to work with Oxnard College to bring a little more service to the residents of Oxnard. By chance, do you track the residents from Oxnard that go to Moorpark or Ventura?
We are continually trying to do a better job of that. One of the other programs that I didn't mention, but is worth noting, because especially Mayor Pro Tem McDonald has been asking about it for years, is the VC Bus Pass. So we have a pass now that you can use. I have a card right here. This lets you ride any transit service in the system. The drivers on all the buses have different fare boxes, so we do track the students. But what we'd like to do is get more and more riders using this card, which lets us track their origins and destinations more closely, because once you know that more granular detail level, that can help you plan for service better. So it's an ongoing challenge, but the schools have been great to work with on it. Sometimes there's been a few fits and starts with, if the student ID machine isn't working when the quarter starts. So we've always tried to err on the side of still letting people ride, but we do try to track them as closely as we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Teron.
Thank you for the presentation. Really good information, and glad to get this overview of everything that VCTC does and is working on right now. A couple questions I have. Just getting back to the challenges that are being faced by the commission, is it safe to assume that layered on top of the ridership recovery that we're looking at post-pandemic, is there also a staffing shortage? It's a factor that you're facing, as well as many sectors, including municipalities, are facing?
Absolutely, and I think any transit operator would tell you the same thing. One thing we saw during the pandemic, and I guess it probably wasn't surprising, is people who had been career bus drivers decided to either retire early or go into driving a delivery service where they had minimal public interaction, not having to juggle some of the challenges that came with that. I mean, I think fortunately Ventura County hasn't seen some of the levels, though, of really challenging riders, whether folks dealing with mental health crises, sometimes substance abuse issues. During the pandemic, when libraries closed, many of those folks went to public transit. They went to train stations. They went to buses. And it presented unique challenges, especially for the drivers.
And it was pretty rough for the drivers during that time.
It was very rough. And I think some of them decided to leave the field. And I think we're getting some of them back now. But I think employee retention on every level employee retention and employee recruitment is a challenge, I think, for every public agency right now.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that, and thank you for that. And I hope, is it safe to assume that VCTC is also looking at ways to address that through incentivizing folks to join up, or look at our other local transit agencies for employment to fill those vacancies we have?
Again, that the collaboration really came through there, where in the past, most agencies, whether it was Gold Coast or VCTC, we kind of did our own thing with hiring. But what we've done now is really try to work together, because we realize that it's in all our interest to hire more drivers. So we share the information about job fairs. We share the information about it's a great career to be a driver in public transit. It's a community service career. And I like to think maybe we're turning the corner a little bit, starting to get some new drivers. But I think if there's any positive thing that came about it, is almost across the board driver wages have gone up because I think that
Which is good.
was a clear, something that clearly needed to be done, especially with I think the service drivers provided during the pandemic. But it'll continue to be a challenge for a while, I think.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, it's a little bit of a comment, and it's going to take some three-dimensional thinking, because I'm going to be talking about later this decade, or towards the end of this decade. If we're looking at, I was happy to see the examples of microtransit that we have throughout the county, and I know Gold Coast has worked on that as well. They presented to us recently about some of those efforts. And, a question I have around that is, when we look towards the end of this decade, I would imagine for public transit, we'd still have the traditional, what we've seen for decades, of a driver and a large vehicle like a bus that will transport people. When we look at microtransit, in my head, and I was having a conversation with someone today about this, there may be more autonomous small vehicles that are gyroless and operate on GPS and are an evolved technology of what we have today, that will, you just hail it from your phone or from some device that's not even invented yet at your home, and it'll come get you, take you to the store, you get your groceries, and you come home, and then it goes and it waits for its next call. But looking at this, I'm happy to see that, and regionally we're looking at microtransit, because I'm hoping that that system will be an early adopter of that, or maybe even first to market, because certainly the private industry, or the public sector has a say in that, but the private sector can certainly get a jump on that. But I think it serves the community well versus a kind of a venture capital type of investment that someone might make. So I'm just throwing that out there as again, three-dimensional thinking. I could be wrong in 10 years.
It's great to hear. Mayor Pro Tem McDonald participated in our strategic plan we had early in March, and one of the goals that the commission adopted was to become a leader in the field of MOS, last acronym I promise, but that stands for Mobility as a Service, and it's really using a digital platform like a phone to help people with their mobility choices and challenges, and whether that's autonomous vehicles down the road, whether it's just looking at how our mobility patterns have changed, and they have changed drastically since the pandemic, how we get out in front of that. So innovation is going to be a key. I know that's something Alex Wynn has been talking about, and Oxnard's had a couple speakers about that, and it may sound really far out there right now, but I think there is a big shift happening in how we move around, and it needs to change, and we need to change with it.
Thank you for that. And 25 years ago, if you had told somebody, we're not going to need all these payphones one day, everybody's going to have a phone in their pocket, even fifth graders.
Well, I think even before the advent of what they call the TNCs, or Uber and Lyft, 10 years ago, if you told people that we would be regularly probably getting into strangers' cars, in their personal cars, and being driven around by them, right, people may have looked at you funny, but we don't think about that now as being odd. And the only difference really is that medium, Uber and that digital medium that allows people to do that. So,
Thank you again.
Thank you, Martin. I know there's a lot of information, and VCTC and I was a member of VCTC for many, many years, and there's a lot of things happening there, even in Gold Coast, and I know that our Mayor Pro Tem has done an excellent job in helping us out with VCTC, with Gold Coast, and I just want to thank again for excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Zaragoza. Thank you, members of the City Council. Great to see you all again, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, RK. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor Zaragoza.
And no speakers on this item.
Correct. We have no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Thank you so much. Our next item is going to be the opening ceremonies, and before I start with the opening ceremonies, I'd like to share that we have an item K1, a public hearing for the U-Haul. This is a project at 2420 South Oxnard Boulevard, U-Haul project. The applicant has requested this item be withdrawn from tonight's agenda, so this item will be taken off the calendar and brought back to the City Council for consideration in a future date to be determined. So if you're here on behalf of U-Haul, that's not going to be heard tonight. The applicant, U-Haul, wanted to withdraw that item, just for information. That's a public hearing for today. So anyway, so we'll start off with our Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll probably like to have our Mayor Pro Tem help us out with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please help us.
Please place your hand over your heart and join me in saluting the flag of our nation by saying, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Okay. Our next item is, this is a ceremonial item, D1. This is a presentation of proclamation designated month of April 2023 as Fair Housing Month. And we have a couple of representatives, I understand, from the Board of Supervisors. And let's go ahead and, do we have, let me see. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? We have, my understanding that we have Joliet here, and also we have Rob Leatherwood is going to accept a proclamation from the Board of Supervisors. Coming up. How are you? Welcome. Yeah, nice to see you. Rob, welcome, sir. Yeah, good. So this is a proclamation, Fair Housing Month, April 2023, whereas April 10, 2023 marks the 55th anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act, Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968 as amended, which enunciates a national policy of fair housing without discrimination and encourages fair housing opportunities for all. Whereas Ventura County Coastal Association of Realtors and Real Estate Fraud Advisory Team is committed to highlighting the Fair Housing Act, continuing to address discrimination in our community, to support programs that will educate the public about rights to equal housing opportunities, and also to plan partnership efforts with other organizations to help ensure that one has equal rights to fair housing, which is really important. Whereas the National Housing Association of Realtors Code of Ethics commits all realtors to provide equal professional services without discrimination based on race, color, religion, or sex, or familial status, handicap, sexual orientation, gender identity, and national origin. Now therefore, John C. Zergos, the mayor of the city of Oxnard, does hereby proclaim the month of April 2023 as Fair Housing Month in the city of Oxnard, and asks all residents of our community to join in affirming our obligation and commitment to fair housing opportunities for all in civil rights. And this is presented to you on April the 13th on behalf of the City Council. Would you like to share anything?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So every year at this time, we just reaffirm the fact that everybody should be allowed to have fair housing and housing in general. So we really appreciate this proclamation today, and we're so happy to be here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Rob?
We just appreciate the city's willingness to help us with this effort. It's something that's important. 50 years into this, we're still having segregation and problems, but we're always working to make progress. And we just appreciate y'all's commitment to helping us with this important month.
Thank you. And also, I think the real estate fraud program is really important, because I know that there's quite a few individuals there's a lot of fraud, especially with our seniors. And you have really taken care of that tremendously. I know, for example, we've had opportunities when I was, by the way, I was a realtor too at one time. And there was many times where even a family member would do a quick claim on somebody's property, especially our seniors. They would sign up and say, Mom, sign here, sign that. And you had false notary work and so forth. That real estate fraud has really helped to working with the DA of Ventura County.
For sure.
So thank you so much again on behalf of the City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, our next item is items not in the agenda, and at this time, we have individuals that can speak up to 3 minutes on items not on the agenda. We'll start off with Pedro Descano. Pedro? And again, I want to reiterate, if you're here for the U-Haul, for the public hearing, that's been canceled. Go ahead, Pedro.
Thank you for that, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Zaragoza and Council. How you guys doing? My name is Pedro Toscano. I'm a business agent with the Southwest Mountain States Carpenters, and from April 12th through the 18th, we are on a campaign of tax fraud. This is our campaign to bring awareness to the community of illegal practices from contractors that do not report their fair share. And with that, it shortens any funding that goes into our communities. You guys spend a lot of time and hours fighting to bring resources to this community. And when a contractor doesn't pay their fair share, it trickles down. Trickles down to educators, trickles down to first responders, trickles down to our police force, training, equipment for everybody, and it just doesn't let this society function the way it should. The solution is not by increasing taxes to our community fellow members. The solution is collecting these taxes that these thieves avoid and evade year in, year out. The problem is that overall in the United States, this is an $8.4 billion crisis. So if we don't get a hold of doing our part in our community of trying to collect the money that is generated in our communities and then spend in our community so it could recycle itself into funding for the resources, we're not going to have those. We're always going to have less of mediocre, less than standard. So that is what we're here for. Bring awareness. April 12th through the 18th every year, we come up here and we like to present it to the public. So thank you for your time, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you, Pedro. Our next speaker is Jeff Massey. Jeff.
Hi, thank you for your time. Jeff Manson, local resident. I'm a carpenter. I like to work locally.
Get closer to the mic. Yeah, thank you.
I'm a carpenter. I like to work locally. What I'd like to say about tax fraud is I try to be involved, and I try to work locally so I can spend more time with my family. This is important to me because when I have to go out of the area, obviously, I spend my money out of the area. I do less things with my family, and I tend to spend more time on the highway, that kind of stuff. Tax fraud locally, what it does is businesses come from out of the area. They ship in guys. They don't pay their proper taxes, and that kind of money that we put into that then gets shipped out. They're not staying here. They're not spending the money, and they're not reinvesting in our community. And I'm looking to build the local community, and I'm looking to build up the local community through keeping our money here. I think it's important for you guys to know there's plenty of people that will come out here with a bunch of numbers and tell you the exact statistics and that kind of stuff. I'm here more because I'm a local working guy. I'm one of your constituents who gets out and is involved and votes. And it's just important for us to keep the money here, to keep reinvesting in our community and to help fight the tax fraud and really stay on top of it, because it is a huge problem. I see it out there every day when I'm working, and I'm boots on the ground, and I see it happening, and it's just my voice is to bring it up and say it is happening and something needs to be done about it, and we need to stay focused on it. Okay, and that's all I got. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for sharing. Lang Martinez.
Mayor, council members, my name is Lang Martinez. I'm a known advocate here in Ventura County, but more like, I guess you could say, an agitator. I'd like to read something that Emilio Ramirez said. He responded to outreach units. He said he does it. He said that these people, they suffer from traumas, and he said that they'd rather be sitting in their own house on their own couch and getting high. Recently, I did 2 articles. I was asked to go to Santa Barbara and meet with Randy Rouse, and I'll be going back there for a little while. Recently, I was pulled into LA, met with law enforcement officer Dion Joseph, and I'll be talking to Alex Cohen. I'm going to get back to that statement. I just got done with Epic Times. That should be out this week or next week. I'll be on California Insider. The comments that he made is talking about being on your own house and your own couch and getting high. We have a problem, not just here in Oxnard, but in Ventura, with people that are out of their mind when it comes to drug addiction, alcoholism, and mental health issues. We've had an individual that was recently man-fatally stabbed at Surfers Point. Well, I'm not a recipient of Project Room Key or Home Key. That's not where my recovery came from. But we have a gentleman that was stabbed, and he was in Project Room Key. The real story to that is he went down there to meet with his connections, and shit went bad. We just recently had a 61-year-old man wanted to do an assault who was also homeless, and Oxnard PD had to shoot him. We also had another gentleman, a youngster, 18 years old, that was in somebody else's car on Bard Street that was totally out of his mind, and I know the story on that one, and he was shot as well. Oxnard and the encampments have more 290 child molesters than per capita that are on the loose. See, Mercy House doesn't take them. The churches don't take them. Sober Livings don't take them. But according to Emilio Ramirez and your Project Home Key, Room Key, and giving them a place to live, you guys will take them. These are the exact people that I would love to knock on my door and ask me for a cup of sugar or maybe an extra lighter for the Pookie. These people are dangerous. In regards to your situation that you've done on Todd Row, bravo. So we have individual 64 beds, people going in regards to mental health. Well, what's the game plan when they return back out to society? I mean, how long is the program for? Is it indefinite? Is it per their sentence? How do we know what kind of help they're going to get and where you're going to be putting them? In our neighborhoods? We have a problem there. And the problem now is when we've had 3 individuals die, and we had 2 of them had to die by law enforcement, we have a problem and a safety issue in the community by bringing these people to our community. See, I can tell that story because I was one of them.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Anthony Ventura.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members of Oxnard. My name is Anthony Ventura. I've been a carpenter since the 80s, and I just like my colleagues had mentioned earlier before, we see it, and I'm also a representative for the carpenters as well. So we walk on jobs on a daily basis, and we see the tax fraud. It's usually a lot of Spanish-speaking carpenters, laborers, electricians that are being exploited out there. They're being cash pay. Maybe they're working on a prevailing wage job, and you have coyotes on different projects. This is happening more than what you think is. Recently, the district attorney of Ventura County actually came out and set up a task force to go after that. I know my colleagues probably mentioned it's over $8.4 billion is lost in revenue. And I mean, we see it in Oxnard, we see it in Ventura, we see it, it's everywhere. And it's really prevalent in the housing industry. You'll see it a lot. I mean, we were just on a job today. When you ask somebody on a prevailing wage job or on any job, how much do they make, and they can't tell you, there's an issue. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Ventura. Madam Clerk, do we have any other speakers either virtually or here in the audience?
Mayor Zaragoza, we have no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Thank you. So our next item, item F, this is a report of the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as we bring up the few slides I have, I do want to make a quick mention about next week's meeting. It's rare that we're having a Thursday night meeting, so I get to make this announcement. Although, as I recall, when I grew up, Thursday night was must-see TV. Maybe we should have all of our meetings on Thursday nights. Maybe more people might watch. So next week's meeting, we have some minor amendments. Therefore, number one, the meeting will begin at 5 p.m., not 4:30. We're removing the closed session item. We're also adding a consent item that has to do with submitting an application to the state because we recently received the notice for the grant, and to be timely and competitive, we want to submit it as soon as possible. So next Tuesday's meeting will begin at 5 without a closed session. Okay, next is, there will be in April 2 more assistance workshops for utility bill assistance. They'll take place next Monday, April 17th, and the Monday after that, both at 8:30 a.m. Here in our downtown facility at 214 South C Street. This is for, to help you apply to get utility bill assistance. In the meantime, if you have questions, please call Community Action of Ventura County. Their phone number is 805-436-4000. Again, this is our collaboration with Community Action to help our residents who are in need of utility bill assistance. Next update is a reminder that on Monday, April 24th in the evening, there will be a town hall meeting with regard to the progress of the Ormond Beach Restoration and Public Access Project. That meeting is scheduled for 6 p.m. We believe it should take around 2 hours. It will be at the South Oxnard Center, which is at 200 East Bard Road. Zoom will be available if you can't attend in person, and I am pretty certain we will have interpreters there as well. Yes, we will. So again, that is Monday, April 24, 6 p.m. to hear an update about what's happening with regard to the Ormond Beach Restoration and Public Access Project. Then finally, just another reminder, with all the rain that we've had this winter, expect weeds around everywhere, frankly, in California that's had rain, but certainly here in Oxnard, expect our weeds to get out of control. We are chasing them as fast as we can, so please be patient and utilize the 311 app to let us know where it is getting out of control, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on either virtually or in person?
Mayor Zaragoza, we have no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Thank you. Our next item is item G. This is council members, any brief announcements on some of the activities that you had, and also any council members like to bring any items before the city council for future agendas. And we got 3 minutes, and we'll start off with council member Valenzuela.
Thank you, Mayor Zaragoza. I was able to attend 2 different neighborhood council meetings the past week and a half. On the 5th, I joined the Cal Giesler Neighborhood Council meeting, hearing from our public safety officers on traffic and parking issues in the Cal Giesler neighborhood. And last night, I spoke with the Southwoods Neighborhood Council, just giving them some of my priorities on the council and hearing back what they would like to see in the next year and a half of my term. Overall, still just reading all the master plans for the city has bring forth for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Perrella.
Thank you. I'd like to engage the city attorney in a question. We've had some people come in and talk about tax fraud. My understanding from having gone to school board meetings when they have a prevailing wage, there's a third-party compliance supposed to be checking that stuff. Can we possibly have something on the agenda in the future explaining how that works? Because the claim is we're losing a lot of money, but it also, I understand from people that have taken complaints to the Department of Labor, it's up to the people that are being taken advantage of to stand up and speak up. And so an update, I think, would be appreciated by this council member. I don't know the rest of the
Sure,
council.
we'll work that into an item that's already being worked up to come to a future
Thank
council meeting.
And I'd like to let the public know, there was a mention about the Ormond Beach update. The Agramon site at 6859 Arnold Road is looking for a modification to increase the capacity and size and life of the project. There's a public review of the project from April 10th through May 10th, and there's the ability to comment, review. If people are interested in the Ormond Beach, I think this is something that they should take a look at. Thank you.
Councilmember, can you announce who's what agency's reviewing that and where to make the public comment?
I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. I didn't, it's like finishing the paperwork. It didn't not complete. The County of Ventura Planning Division, Agramon-Shoreline Major Modification Case number PL 13-0101, Notice Availability of Initial Study Mitigated Negative Declaration. And there is a link. There's no phone number at Ventura County Hall of Administration. There is no phone number given. There's a point person, John Quasato, I believe. His spelling of his name is Oquendo. He's a senior planner with the county. And I beg your pardon, there is a phone number, 805-654-2509. And the information is there.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Turan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple quick updates here. First, next week on April 19th, River Park Neighborhood Council will be having their monthly meeting. It will be at Rio Vista Middle School, 6 p.m. I also want to take the opportunity to thank that neighborhood council. They hosted a series of workshops or special meetings with our special districts staff to bring to the community information about the Community Facilities District and what they'd be looking at for ideas for their budget for this coming fiscal year. And I was able to attend one of those workshops with Councilmember Valenzuela, and they were really great information. I would just want to thank them for providing that opportunity for the River Park community to be able to be directly involved in that process. Then on April 20th, there are two neighborhood council meetings in District 2, and one of them is shared with District 1. The first is at South Bank, and Councilor Perello is planning to attend that one, and I will attend the Sarah Linda Neighborhood Council meeting, both of those the evening of April 20th at their respective schools that are located within the communities. And then last announcement, and I believe our control room folks, we have Diego who has a flyer that I asked to have shared. The State Superintendent, Tony Thurman, has initiated a statewide teacher recruitment program. Folks who are thinking about going into a career, looking for work, if you've considered becoming a teacher or becoming a school social worker, a school counselor, school psychologist, school child welfare and attendance official, there's a massive statewide recruitment effort happening now. As you may have seen if you saw the appointment item, there's a labor shortage on a number of sectors throughout the state and the nation, education being one of them. Very similar story where many teachers retired during or just after the pandemic. And we just do not have a pipeline of new educators to replace them at the pace that we need to. And so the state superintendent has initiated some grant programs where they're awarding up to $20,000 to help someone become a teacher or become one of these different professions. And you can see the website there at the bottom. It's csac.ca.gov/GSTG. I also have a direct email address if you have questions. They told me I can provide that. It's teachnca, so teach, T-A-C-H-I-N-C-A, teachnca at cde.ca.gov. And know that there are a number of pathways folks can do. You can go to community college and it'll help pay for that, as well as earn money along the way. Someone can go to a traditional four-year university. They can do a 5-year program, or if they already have a degree, they can look at getting into a credential program for any of these professions you see here in education. And I just wanted to announce that and let folks know that is underway. If you're even thinking about going into education, I hope you'll visit the website or email the email address to check that out. And if you can bring that down, Diego, I have one last thing. I would like to request for a future agenda item. We've had community action be at our service center in the month of March and now the month of April, providing utility bill assistance for folks who need that to get caught up if they've ended up behind on their utility bills. And I'm hoping that maybe at a future council meeting as an appointment item, we might have community action present to us about the services they offer countywide, but also in the city of Oxnard. And I think that'd be great information for the public and our folks here to have. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Good information. Also, I'd just like to share that this Sunday I'll be participating with a Martin Luther King walk over in Colonia. It's going to start at Sunday at 10 a.m. over at the Cesar Chavez School on Cooper Road and Juanita. And it'll be a good event, you know, and I'm sure that most of the council members are. Yeah, Cesar Chavez. Oh, that Martin Luther King, well, was pretty close. Cesar Chavez. Anyway, that's going to be Sunday at 10 a.m. Okay, that's all I have.
I'm sorry, Mayor Zaragoza. There's one more thing I wanted to report. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, actually, this past Saturday, I was able to attend the Diversity Collective Gala Awards, and actually was able to see Councilmember Tehran receive his award for being an ally for the LGBTQ community. As a member of the LGBTQ plus community myself, I was very happy to see him be honored, along with many other key community allies. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councilmember.
Okay. Tehran, we're good? Well, we have.
Excuse me, Mayor? May the record show that Councilmember Basua joined the meeting at 6:28 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, our next item is, do you have any items you'd like to share for? No, okay. So this is a review of the consent agenda item, but before I would take any public comments on this item, I'd like to read this item. It says, the information consent agenda staff will be pulling 2 items from the consent item for a separate discussion. It'll be J2 regarding the Ventura Road electronic billboard project, and also J3 regarding the River Park Boulevard electronic billboard project. And staff will outline some specific recommended changes, to the development agreement for consideration by City Council. And also for item J, information consent item, this is, staff is pulling J2 regarding the Ventura Road electronic billboard project, and item J3 regarding the River Park Boulevard electronic billboard project from the consent item. Staff will be presenting recommended changes to the development agreement for both projects. So Ken, you have any information before we?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. As you know, items J2 and J3 relate to the 2 proposed billboards. Tonight, the items were before you for a adoption of those ordinances, but based upon a meeting with the applicant, city staff are requesting that specific changes be made to the 2 development agreements. So I will first really, I think it's important to state for the record, each one of you should have received an email from Aaron Starr and Alicia Purcell of Moving Oxnard Forward, where they made certain claims that these development agreements violated the First Amendment. They went at a length of number of over-the-top accusations. Those could not be further from the truth. Under existing California Supreme Court authority and state law, public entities are prohibited from using public funds to promote or oppose ballot measures or candidates for public office. And the city has historically met these requirements and continues to meet those requirements. In fact, under the existing terms of the 2 development agreements, section 7.2B, the city was already required to comply with state law. But it's important for transparency, both for the city as well as for the billboard company, to make even more explicit that the city is fully complying with the requirements, and also to show that none of the advertising the city can do on the billboards will in any way be politically based. It's there for public programs, for special activities, for public service announcements. So these are important things. So I just wanted to read the new language that staff is proposing be added to the last sentence of section 7.2B of both of the development agreements. So I'll just read the quote, the new language. Notwithstanding any language in this section 7.2B to the contrary, city usage shall not include any, quote, political advertising, which means advertising that promotes or opposes any candidate for public office or promotes or opposes a ballot measure, referendum, bond issue, or any federal, state, or local legislation, regulation, or other discretionary action. So that's the first change that staff would recommend and which the applicant has wholeheartedly agreed to. The second change is to section 8 of the development agreement in both of these documents. Contrary to the statements once again made by Mr. Starr and Ms. Purcell, section 8 in its current form fully complies with the law. But, once again, to remove any claimed ambiguities, the city and the Outfront propose that specific language be deleted from section 8. So I'm going to summarize the provisions that are deleted. So under that section, the city proposes that the first 3 sentences be deleted, and also the clause of the 4th sentence, which reads as follows: in addition to the general limitations on billboard advertising to strictly commercial advertising, end quote. And then also to delete the following provisions further in that section, which reads as follows, quote, containing any political advertising, which means advertising that promotes or opposes any candidate for public office or promotes or proposes a ballot measure, referendum, bond issue, or any federal, state, or local legislation, regulation, or other discretionary action. We're happy to bring these changes to you because we believe that it really promotes the transparency that the city has been delivering and shows that this is actually a project which is helpful for public discourse, and it is not an attempt for the city to somehow act improperly. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Council members, any questions at this time? Councilman Perrella?
Yes.
And then Councilman Turan after that.
As the history we have with the people that are bringing these complaints, I appreciate that they brought something up. They brought something that probably should have been maybe asked, but it will improve this situation. But I would like to know, do I have to ask to have it on a future agenda item? How much money has the city of Oxnard spent, taxpayer money has the city of Oxnard spent fighting Mr. Starr over the years?
Yeah, so Councilmember Perrello, that is not this item, and we don't have that number at
this time.
Our fingertips.
Then I would like to ask if I can get that put on an agenda in the future. I mean, I appreciate Mr. Starr and Ms. Purcell's diligence, but I think the public needs to know exactly what it's costing the city.
Okay.
Thank you.
For the future item.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Turan?
Thank you, Mayor. I have another request after my comment right now. I want to first thank City Attorney's Office and Mr. Rizal for your attention to this and increasing our transparency in this process. Although at the previous meeting I voted against this and I don't intend to change my vote at this time, I do appreciate the work that went into this regardless. One thing that Councilor Perrello did reference as far as diligence, something that I hope the half dozen people or so who emailed us today about this item, I hope they can think to themselves and ask the question, why did this just come out yesterday on April the 12th with the hearing being today the 13th, excuse me, the consent item being today the 13th? This language in this item dates back to late December, early January when I went to the Planning Commission. And I believe that Mr. Starr wrote Measure M and sent it to the voters, and it's now enacted where folks, including himself, can watch the Planning Commission videos ahead of time, even though they're not allowed to be shown again at the commission meeting because of Measure M. Then, when it came to us last time, it was a Measure M video, and they could still view it. And the information's been available for several months now. Yet yesterday was the day that the call to action to however many people were on their mailing list came out. And I'm just hoping the 5 or 6 people who followed through with that call to action can think, why was it so last minute? I mean, this could have been a conversation that happened months ago, and this transparency could have been done back then before it ever came to this council, even before it went to the Planning Commission. So I'm just throwing that out there. I have a little frustration with that. I don't know if anyone's ever had a supervisor or a manager who does everything at the last minute, and it adds unnecessary stress and urgency, and it just doesn't feel like leadership when someone does that. So anyways, I appreciate the work that went into this. My request is, though, if I heard correctly, maybe I missed it, we have items 2 and 3 separated out from the rest of the consent agenda, correct?
Right.
I'm going to request that item 4 also be separated out so I can do a separate vote on that one, if that's okay.
Okay. So then can we go ahead and vote on those items and that was amended accordingly?
Yes, you.
And we'll,
Well, we do need to call for public comment here.
I understand that, but just for future, okay.
Yes.
I have a question on number 5, but I don't need to have it pulled, but I have a question on number 5.
Okay, let me see, let me call, see if we have any public comments on this item. On
Mayor
consent.
Zaragoza, yes, we have one virtual speaker.
Okay, let's go ahead and take the speaker, then we'll go from there.
Aaron Starr, please press *6 to unmute, and you have 3 minutes.
This is actually Alicia Purcell. I do serve as an officer of Moving Oxnard Forward. It's kind of hard to follow the amendments on the fly, so I'll just say I'm not sure whether this resolves all the issues. We'll have to evaluate once we see the updated language. But this is not a transparency issue. This is an issue of legality. And this has been reviewed by the city attorney's office, and it's their task to catch things like this. So, you know, I don't understand the criticism there. It's your job. So the tweaks to the language regarding, you know, what the city composed, we're well aware that the city does claim to put out information language, which is really just political activity. So I'm not sure that really addresses that, but I'll take a look at your new language and we'll see. As you mentioned, we did raise a number of issues, including giving preference to commercial speech over political speech. I'll have to take a look at your changes. I do want to point out that that's a rather important subject, and for all the criticism of, oh, why didn't you notice this? Well, the staff report and, you know, videos didn't highlight that subject. Maybe there's a reason for that, because you wanted it to be difficult to find. You know, we raised other issues about the city giving itself basically censorship rights over the ads on the billboard, that the city will decide. Very subjective questions of whether they think it's misleading, and on that basis we'll exercise censorship. That's an issue. I think it's an issue that you mandate pricing discounts to certain entities. I think that may raise equal protection concerns. There may be other issues here. So, you know, again, I don't know how this got so far along without staff internally saying, no, hey, we can't do this. But the good news is you've made some changes, and I'm going to have to evaluate those. Like I said, once I see the final language, it is much better for you to fix it
30 seconds.
so that people don't have to involve attorneys to address it. But you know, I'm going to have to take a look at your changes and see how that worked in light of the comments we had submitted. Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, any additional speakers, either virtually or in person?
Mayor Zaragoza, we have no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, so Councilor Perello, item number 5.
Can I address, Mr. City Attorney, can I address the comment that was just made?
Yes.
Okay. I don't understand because I respect everybody's right to do what they're going to do with it's legal. I really respect and appreciate the city attorney's office doing the work they did to this at the last minute. Ms. Purcell, the way she is describing it, she is going to have to decide if this is going to be satisfactory to her. Is she expecting us to hold the item till she is done on her timetable? That she's going to make the city of Oxnard jump through her loop?
Mr. City Attorney.
So that she can do the list? Because if as the council member, and I respect his points, Mr. Turan brought up, this has been available for a long time. And at the last minute, now she wants to review it on her own. Am I to assume we possibly going to get into the lawsuit on this?
Can I answer the question, council member? So because what is being proposed tonight is an alteration to an ordinance that's already been introduced, it can't be adopted tonight. So what the council would be doing would be approving the alteration, and then that would have to come back at a future meeting for adoption.
For a second reading?
Yeah, so that would give any interested party a chance to review that alteration and raise any concerns at the time it comes back on a future agenda.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you. Okay, so now that we have items 1 to 5, and Councilor Turan, you wanted to pull 4 to vote separately or not vote on it?
To vote separately.
To vote. So let's vote on all items.
I have a question on number 5. I'm not
Okay, go
requesting
ahead.
for a separate vote.
Go ahead.
But on number 5, I did get an opportunity to speak to Mr. Ramirez, and I appreciate the time that he took to respond to me, but I would like to share the information with the public. I think it's a perfect opportunity. We're going to be doing some work for handicapped improvements on particular properties we have. The concerns that I have, and he addressed them, but I'd like to share. Are we having anybody move out of facility to do this? Question 1. And question 2, is there a list that people can sign up to apply for the ability to get into this handicapped accessible ADA compliant building? Or is there already a list have been taken? Those are my only questions. And I appreciate your response getting back to me.
The unit is currently vacant, so there is not a need to relocate anybody from the unit. The unit will be converted from 1 unit to 2 units, where one of the 2 units will be converted into an ADA accessible unit. But there is no one in the unit, therefore no relocation. There currently exists a fairly extensive wait list of people that are in need of both an ADA accessible unit and a standard public housing unit. So we will draw from that wait list.
Is, in your opinion, just to help me and the public, is the list pretty much complete that people can still sign up, but it's basically the first few people that have signed up, it's a first come, first serve? How does that work?
The list is a list of people that are interested in public housing units, which is fairly long. I honestly don't know the number of people on that list, but it's fairly long. Within that list of people that are interested in public housing units, there are people that are in need of an ADA accessible unit. They'd have to qualify for such a unit. And there is a fairly extensive list of people that are on the public housing list that need an ADA accessible unit. So we draw on a first come, first served basis based on eligibility from that list.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your response. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Okay, so.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Excluding J2, J3, and J4, I would move the balance of info consent for approval.
Okay, do we have we got a second? So it's first by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilman Perrello. All those items that Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, please vote. Okay.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, now we're looking.
Mr. Mayor, I would now move J2 and J3 as amended for approval.
Okay, so we got a second? Second. Okay, so first by by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Perrello for.
Just a moment, we're trying to sort out the vote here. It doesn't
Yes.
show that.
I'd like to clarify that. My apologies. the vote for consent items.
This is for
J1.
J2 and J3.
J2 and J3.
Yes, but I need to
amended.
clarify the vote for consent item J1 and J5.
And fine.
5 approved and 2 nays, so the vote is 5-2.
But so didn't record?
Well-
Since the machine doesn't seem to be working right now, can we take a voice vote on that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, let's
Again,
vote.
this is to take a vote on consent items 1 and J1 and J5.
Okay,
I'm going to go ahead and read the roll call. Councilmember Turan?
Yes.
Councilmember Basua?
Aye.
Mayor Zaragoza?
aye.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald?
Aye.
Councilmember Madrigal? Councilmember Perillo?
Yes.
Councilmember Valenzuela?
Aye.
Thank you. The vote on those 2 consent items, again, J1 and J5, motion passes 6-1.
And,
And Mr. Mayor, I'll repeat my motion.
Okay, go ahead.
For J2 and J3, I would recommend approval as amended.
Okay.
okay, we'll get, okay, that's a first by Mayor Pro Tem, second by.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I apologize. I need to go ahead and read the vote again for the first 2 consent items, J1 and J5. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you for the correction. Okay, now we're at J2 and 3, and there was first by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilor Perillo,
And for the record, that was as amended by.
as amended. Please vote.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I believe I understood that items J2 and J3 were being pulled from the agenda?
But we as amended, right?
They were pulled from the consent
Consent.
agenda for separate discussion, and now we're taking the separate vote on those items as amended, as read by
Yes.
Mr. Rozell.
Who made the motion?
I did.
May I please ask you to read the motion back for the record?
My motion was J2 and J3 to be approved as amended.
And
by staff.
What is the amendment?
it's amended per,
This stuff that Mr. Roselle
For
just
Mr.
read to
Roselle.
us during the meeting earlier, he has the amendment.
he has the amendment right there. He was, that was presented earlier.
Okay, so you are voting to approve J2 and J3 as amended?
Right, and do you want a roll call on that?
Yes.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
the motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem, and who is the second?
Second by Perillo. So,
Okay. Councilmember Turan?
No.
Councilmember Basua?
Aye.
Mayor Zaragoza?
aye.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald?
Aye.
Councilmember Madrigal? Councilmember Perillo?
Yes.
Councilmember Valenzuela?
Aye.
Okay,
We have, the vote is 6-1. Motion carries 6-1. Thank you.
so that was,
My apologies.
well, it was five.
Motion carries 5-1. We have 1 absent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just for, again, to reiterate, that is not for adoption of those ordinances, that is to approve the alteration, and that will come back at a future agenda.
As per the
Correct.
motions, yeah, thank you.
Exactly.
Okay, now item 4. So the vote on item 4,
You need a motion and a
Yes.
second first.
with a motion.
I will move the recommended
Okay,
action.
recommended by, motion by Basua, second by
I'll second.
Mayor Pro Tem. This item 4, please, roll call.
Councilmember Turan?
No.
Councilmember Basua?
Yes.
Mayor Zaragoza?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald?
Yes.
Councilmember Perillo?
Yes.
Councilmember Valenzuela?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-1.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And our next item, our last item is L1. And this is the Finance Department presentation of a single audit report. The recommendation of the City Council receive and file a 2022 single audit report from audit firm by Eddie and Payne. And this presentation is going to be made by,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, sir.
since we're not going to do K1, do we still want to check and see if there were any speakers that did want to speak on it that might still be there?
On K1, so that was continue to, do we have any speakers on that item at all?
Mayor Zaragoza, we do have speakers that sign up, but they're not available right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilman Teran?
Just in case folks have just joined and didn't see the beginning of the meeting, would you mind just repeating the statement regarding that item?
This is a public item, K1, public hearing, project number 2420, Oxnard Boulevard U-Haul project. The applicant has requested that this item be withdrawn from tonight's agenda. This item will be taken off the calendar and will be brought back to the City Council for consideration at a future date to be determined later. Thank you. Okay, so then we're going over to L1, reports. And again, as I mentioned before, as a presentation, a single audit report, the City Council received and filed the 2022 single audit report from Eddie and Payne. And this presentation will be live, and we do have someone here from Eddie and Payne that's going to make their presentation.
Do you have my slides? Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Mayor Zaragoza.
Welcome.
Good evening, members of the City Council. Again, I'm here to present the single audit report for fiscal year June 30, 2022. Thank you for this opportunity. Okay. So tonight, I'm going to talk about the single audit report, but we will also cover the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, which is included in that report, and some highlights of the major program that was tested during the single audit and internal control findings. So as I understand, you have received a copy of the single audit report.
Yes.
That was included in your agenda packet.
Thank you.
So just to reiterate from previous presentations that I've done, a single audit is required by the Office of Management and Budget when a non-federal agency spends over $750,000 in federal funds in any given year. The city this year, for June 30, 2022 fiscal year, spent more than $34 million in federal funds on 19 different federal programs. In the single audit report packet that you received, there are actually two independent auditors' reports. The first one is the internal control report required by government auditing standards. That report is related to the financial statements audit that we had performed for that same fiscal year, and that report has been provided to you back in January of 2023. That internal control report also includes a report on compliance with laws and regulations and contracts and agreements. There is no opinion on that report because in the financial statement audit, we only consider internal control in order to plan our audit. So we don't do a lot of testing of internal control. But if we find any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, we report them to you. And as I have noted in the Finance and Governance Committee also, and in my last report to the City Council, there's no findings for internal control.
Which is excellent.
Excellent, yes.
Thank you.
So as I said, this second year in a row
That's
that there's no internal control findings for the city during this fiscal year. So the second report is a report on, includes actually the three other reports that are listed in that slide. The report on the compliance for each major program, the report on internal control over compliance, report on schedule of expenditures of federal awards. I'm sorry about that typo there. All these reports are related to federal funds and the city's compliance with the requirements of programs funded by the federal government. So we do have an opinion on compliance for each of the major programs, and there was only one major program tested this year. Our opinion is that the city complied with in all material with respects with the compliance requirements of the major program.
And you know what, that's extremely important that can you say that again?
Of course, yes, the city is in compliance with the requirements of the federal program.
Thank you so much for that.
Yes. On internal control, there is no opinion again on internal control over compliance because we only consider internal control in order for us to plan the single audit. But again, if we discover any reportable material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, we're required to report them to you. This year, there are none. And I think this is the first time since we've started auditing that there are no internal control issues with federal programs. So that's pretty good, I think.
Excellent, yeah.
So the next one slide here is just a little summary of your schedule of expenditures of federal programs. As I had noted earlier, there's $34.6 million of total federal expenditures for the city. There was one major program selected out of 19 total programs. Out of the major program, sorry, I'm going to have to move to the next slide here. The major program that was selected was the Coronavirus State and Local Government Fiscal Recovery Fund, which is also called the ARPA Fund. There are actually a lot of other programs funded under the ARPA, but this one is one of the biggest ones. So the city spent about $28.3 million in ARPA funds. Part of it was like directly from the Department of the Treasury, and part of it's coming from the California Water Resources Control Board. And I summarized the eligible uses where the city had spent the funds, and they included offset of revenue losses from previous year, and a premium pay, capital outlay, and water and wastewater arrearages payment programs.
Councilman Perrella.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you again. But I have a question on this specific one. Under the title Other, the reason I ask this, the amount for Other is $1.9 million, the third highest amount of those three, of all those accounts. What is in the Other?
I don't have that answer for you right now, but it is a lot of smaller ones.
Cumulative total.
Yeah, it will be below like 100,000 each. So I didn't want to put them all in there. It's just a lot of different programs.
Okay.
I mean, I can provide that to you, or everyone else.
That was a
here
cumulative
at
total
later
of
date.
under 100,000 for.
And the only reason I ask, I remember a guy named Mr. Paul who tried to teach me something. He said, whenever you see the word other and the numbers are bigger than something above it, you better ask some questions. So thank you. I would look forward to seeing what's in that.
Okay.
Title. Thank you.
Good point.
Any other questions?
No. Any additional questions? No.
So again, I repeated here, no internal findings, internal control findings in fiscal year 2022. The prior year findings for the federal awards, they are all resolved. So the majority of them is for indirect cost allocation, which the finding dated back to 2017. That has been worked on by the city in the current year, and it will be implemented starting in the next year, which is the 2024 fiscal year. For the financial statements, there are still findings that are being worked on.
Councilman Toron has a question.
Oh, you can finish your
Go ahead.
statement, then I have a question
Go ahead.
about this slide. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, so for the financial statements, there's still a couple of internal control issues that are being worked on by the IT department, and that is in progress right now.
All right, thank you. And looking at these resolved items here, we have 2021 and 002 CDBG HUD findings, and maybe our staff can help. Is this, if I'm recalling correctly, the items that were disallowed because of a definition difference that HUD had versus what we had, such as life-saving devices? Is this the same item, or is this a different one I'm thinking of?
I believe it is similar to that. I don't know exactly what you are referring to, but there's some findings that related to allowable costs.
Allowable costs, okay. And I just wanted to clarify that this is a routine item and that, well, a routine process that where we have internal controls to make sure that these allowable costs are being met. And if there is a question around HUD defines this cost this way, the city defines it this way, either we agree or we don't agree, and then we go from there. That's what we're looking at here, right? So that way everybody's clear, it's transparent, we're utilizing the funding in a way that we're supposed to be, correct?
That is correct. I mean, this finding was actually for previous years that they had only presented to you last year, 2021. And I believe that the city had provided them with responses. They could still come back and say, no, we don't agree with your responses, and they're still being disallowed. Now, the city obviously has its own interpretation, but HUD is the one that's going to be providing that funding. So obviously their interpretation will rule.
And that's a typical process that goes between agencies on that.
Correct.
Yes, okay, and I appreciate that, and I just wanted to clarify that because I have seen, I'll call it manipulation of information on what that process was and then how it's presented to some members of the public by other members of the public, characterizing it as the city was attempting to defraud HUD or utilize finances in a way that was sneaky or underhanded, when in reality it's the process, and this is why we have internal controls to catch these things, and then we work it out with HUD, and either they allow it or they don't, and we move on with it. So I appreciate that information so we get that clear on the public record.
And that was resolved, which is good. Thank you.
And not only is it resolved, but as was mentioned earlier, there are no internal control findings for
That's
fiscal
right.
year 2022.
That's really, really important.
Correct. And the reason why it's resolved as far as we are concerned. Now HUD is still obviously the ruling party here. As far as internal control and compliance, we think that the city had complied. It's just that the HUD is discounting that, so.
Thank you.
So I think that is my last, that was my last
Thank you for that. Do we have a speaker on this item? Okay.
Aaron Starr, please press *6 to unmute, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So my name is Aaron Starr. I'm the president of Moving Oxnard Forward. I believe the city treasurer has brought this to the attention of the city attorney on March 3rd. I think I was copied on his email, maybe half the city was. I want to make sure the council is also aware of a state statute requiring local agencies, cities being one of them, to rotate auditors at least every 6 years. Government Code Section 12410.6B requires that, quote, commencing with the 2013-14 fiscal year, a local agency shall not employ a public accounting firm to provide audit services to a local agency if the lead audit partner or coordinating audit partner having primary responsibility for the audit or the audit partner responsible for reviewing the audit has performed audit services for that local agency for 6 consecutive years, end quote. It appears that Oxnard is not in compliance with that statute, having used the same auditor for each of the last 8 fiscal year audits. When this agenda item was before the Finance and Governance Committee, the presenter from the audit firm expressed an expectation that they will be doing the next year's audit as well. And it doesn't appear that would be compliant with the statute I just cited. Even the audit which is being presented here tonight was done after the 6-year limit had already been exceeded. So my question for you is, what will the city be doing to remedy this issue? And by the way, just to make a comment here, we're not under any obligation to tell you when you're violating the law, but we do this as a courtesy. The reason why we bring this to your attention is to avoid lawsuits. So you can make your comments about doing stuff at the last minute. We're not under any obligation to tell you at all. We could just wait, let you violate the law, and then take action. We don't want to do that. That's not the way we want to do business with you. We just want you to follow the law. So the question we have for you tonight is, what will the city be doing to comply with Government Code Section 12410.6B? Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, any of the speakers on this item, virtually or in person?
So is that all in your comment?
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Mayor Zaragoza, we have no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Thank you. Okay. This is a receive and file, so if we have no other questions, then we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.